Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Language Sofa, the podcast where we dig into all things language teaching, from the practical to the philosophical, and obviously everything in between. So, I'm Ben Levi, and today we are going to talk about something that often I think gets overlooked, but makes a huge difference to how well our students learn, and that's metacognition, or to put it more simply, helping students understand how they're learning and not just what. So let me set the scene. You've taught a great lesson. There's energy. Students are firing answers at you. They're thinking, yeah, okay, they've got this. So then you fast forward a week and you revisit the same material and you realize it maybe hasn't stuck as well as you thought. A bit of a tumbleweed moment sometimes. So we've all been there. And now that's not that the lesson was bad or that students weren't working hard. It's that they haven't retained what they learn, or more specifically, they haven't learned how to keep hold of it. And that's where I think metacognition comes in. Now, I know metacognition sounds like the kind of thing that lives, obviously, in CPD in a PowerPoint. But honestly, I've been thinking a lot more recently about this. In the languages classroom, it can be a real superpower. Because in language learning, it's a long game. You have to think of it as a process, it's a sequence. It's not just all going to happen in one go. It's all about memory, recall, and steady building of that fluency over time. So if students don't understand exactly why they're doing certain things, why we repeat, why we read so much and have so much input early on, why we revisit things and verbs they've already done, they start seeing the lesson as a series of obstacles or hoops to jump through rather than steps towards their success in obviously a carefully planned process. So let's take retrieval practice as an example. For example, I love a mini whiteboard, I love a do now, but to a student, especially one who's feeling a bit wobbly that day, it can feel like it can just feel like a test. It might be thinking, I've forgotten it, so I failed. But if we explain it to them and we start saying, we're doing this task because retrieving something from memory helps your brain actually store it better, drawing it to the forefront, then understand the effort is the learning, and suddenly it's more of a tool rather than a trap. So actually explaining the why is so important. Same thing with sentence builders. If we don't explain why they're helpful, they reduce cognitive load, they structure your thinking, they help you speak in full sentences and phrases early on. Students might think, oh, I'm probably not meant to be needing this anymore, or this is just a scaffold for the weaker ones. But if we say we're using this now because it helps us rehearse before letting them loose and go more free, it helps embed the language. It helps seeing those chunks of information and how we can explain how it's easier to juggle chunks of information rather than individual words. Then they understand why they're on the journey. If you think of as an adult, whenever you've learned something, you kind of want to know why you're doing it. If you're just learning something for no particular reason, then it's really hard and it's hard to interact with. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, situating activities within the learning sequence and even more so within the communication cycle. So I often explain to students at this point, early on in our sequence, in our lesson sequence, we are doing lots of input at this point. So you will hear me doing lots of speaking. You won't be doing a lot of productive stuff. You won't be doing a lot of speaking yourselves, but that all comes later. So I often explain how an interaction with a foreign person might happen if they're speaking in the target language. When they say something to you, what is the first thing that you try and work out? You try and work out what words they're saying. You try and decipher those words and sounds. Next bit of the process, you're actually trying to translate that in your head to your own language. And then after that, you're working out what to say in your own language, then transferring it to the target language, and so on. So I explain what part of that cycle and the why that they're doing it. So that helps them so much. And all of a sudden, I've noticed them really connect with it a lot more. So this explanation of the why is really effective, and it does engage learners a lot more. So if we're looking at, that kind of commentary, it really doesn't take too long. It could just be 30 seconds of a lesson, but it does give students a sense of direction. It makes them feel like they're part of the process rather than they're just doing another random activity after another. And I have been guilty of that in the past, in going activity without actually saying why they're doing that specific activity. And we've all been there. So I think it's really important that 30 seconds at the start of every activity you do, just say, this is why we're doing this. This is the part of the learning process we're in. That goes for languages and other subjects, I'm sure you'd agree. But especially in languages where you can explain what part of the communication cycle they're in, or what part of the language they're working on, and why they're doing it, why they're revisiting it maybe. And once you start doing that regularly, students start becoming more reflective. They start asking things like, oh, can we do more work or more retrieval on that? They start using things like that, or that reading helps. Can we do another activity like this? Or you'll see them start requesting certain activities, sometimes because they just enjoy them and they find them engaging. But if they see the benefit of those and see why they're doing them, and see how it actually contributes to their learning process, then they'll actually start asking for those things. So you're not just teaching them a language, you're actually teaching them how to learn the language as well. You're actually teaching them what part of that journey they're on. And that's a big shift. So how do we embed this without it taking over? That's a key thing. So little tweaks in your lessons. So narrating your decisions. We're revisiting this verb now because spacing out helps it stick, and having that time to, put your, try and embed it in your long-term memory. It does help it stick. Or model your thinking. Say, I'm using this word here because it connects two contrasting ideas, or it makes it a more advanced sentence. And, even thinking about what they've learned in that lesson, get them to actually think about it, maybe discuss it as well. What helped you learn best today, and why did that work well? Getting them to be more reflective also helps. So these tiny metacognitive nudges, if it were, they build up. They create learners who are more confident, more independent, and crucially, more likely to keep going when things get tough, because they understand what part of the journey they're on. And they understand even that it is a journey, and they haven't got to understand everything in 1 hour. So here's my takeaway. Metacognition isn't an abstract kind of add-on. It's about making learning visible. It's about saying, here's what we're doing, here's why, and here's how it will help you progress and grow as a learner. And especially in languages where it can feel like progress is slow sometimes, success can be fragile. And I think that kind of clarity on things is everything. I think that's what really will really contribute. So let's show students that they're not just learning the language, but the learning process itself, they're understanding. Because when they understand how, they're far more likely to keep moving forward with it. So that's all for today. Thanks for tuning in to Language Sofa. If this episode got you thinking, I'd love to hear from you. So drop me a message or share how you build metacognition into your own practice. And as always, if you found this helpful, please share it with fellow language teachers, as working together and contributing to each other's practice is essential. So I look forward to seeing you next time. See you later.